If I kept a 1 billion note from Zimbabwe during its hyperinflation period and waited decades for the economy to reset to normal terms, could I then cash it in? They would likely have reset the old currency. Mexico did it once, where they lopped off 3 zeros. So, if you had a 1,000 peso note, the next day that old note was worth 1 peso. The actual purchasing power was the same, in theory, however. So, that Zimbabwe note would really likely only be worth what $1 billion Zimbabwe could have bought when the note was printed. And that's if they are even valid at that time. Zimbabwe could just declare them void. Seeing as how Zimbabwe uses the mighty USD these days, that billion-dollar note is worth its weight in toilet paper. Economies with hyperinflation don't really just maintain the same currency and eventually reset. Usually, the hyperinflated currency is gradually phased out as a new, not inflated currency is put into circulation. The old currency is no longer valid money when the process is over. In the 80s in Greece, I spent about $5 to buy 3 Greek drachma notes from just after WW2. 2 were 500,000 drachmas each, and 1 was 50,000 drachmas. I was officially a millionaire. Of course it was worthless, but I made about 50 from betting friends I was a millionaire. Stop being so poor. I have the 100 trillion note. I am gonna make all you billionaires do my dishes. No, you can't cash them in, but there is some good news. I'm told that the Zimbabwe government previously gave its citizens 40 cents 0.4 for a $100 trillion note. As hyperinflation took hold, people stopped using Zimbabwean dollars and used US dollars. Eventually, the Zimbabwe government demonetized the Zimbabwean dollar and the country used US dollars. There have been attempts to produce a new currency in Zimbabwe with varying success. The latest is the Zimbabwe's IG, introduced in April 2024. You can't cash the 100 trillion Zimbabwe note for the new IG. However, if you do have old 100 trillion Zimbabwe notes, you are very fortunate. In 2010, I bought a stack of 100 trillion Zimbabwe dollar notes from a coin and note dealer. I paid $1 per note. I gave them to children as novelty gifts. Then, as now, they had no monetary value at all. But they are of interest to collectors. I only had 3 notes left of the stack, but I advertised them on the auction site eBay, and am now 250 richer, which astounded me. I contacted the children who had received them as gifts, young adults now, but not a single one of them could find the note that I'd given them. They were, in percentage terms, the best investment that I had ever made. Is my 1923 110 Deutschmark worth anything? No, the Zimbabwe dollar is no longer a legal tender, and if resurrected, there is no way they would accept the currency of a former government for its face value. The good news for people of Zimbabwe is that those old comically huge notes can make them decent money as tourist souvenirs. You can find some online for like 30-50. If you could, and many did, there would be a new hyperinflation triggered. Why stop at $1 billion? Get some of those $100 trillion notes. No, it will never be worth anything, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They are only useful as funny collector's items. Yes, for the conversion rate of old currency to new currency, which is basically nothing. If it's a total reset, then no. There's this thing called redenomination, basically erasing some zeros from the currency while keeping the value. A lot of countries did it. The ones I know of is Russia in 1998 and Belarus in 2016. I have about 200,000 in old Turkish lira. I actually have about 2.5 zbo in new Turkish lira. Multiple times when Zimbabwe had devalued their currency, the old notes have stayed in circulation with most of the zeros dropped off. So your $1 bill magically becomes a 1,000 bill or less. Yep, and you'll be glad that you got that penny. 1 billion, small-time stuff. I used a 100 trillion note as a bookmark during law school. What not many are pointing out is that deflation is very bad for economies, so when you recover from hyperinflation, it just means inflation is now a normal amount instead of a high amount. That also applies with people complaining that prices have not gone down after the inflation rate went down. That will never happen. No. The only way to stabilize the economy is to replace that money. They'd allow you to trade that bill for 50 cents or something. You could, but it wouldn't suddenly have a higher value. Zimbabwe wouldn't want to go from hyperinflation to deflation. That would be just as bad, if not worse, than the inflation. What they'll do once they get the inflation under control is reset the currency. Your 1 billion note would turn into a 10 or something. You could exchange it for one of the new 10s, but couldn't spend it, and it wouldn't have more value outside of maybe being a collector's item if most of the 1 billion notes get destroyed. No, because the second half of that would never happen. At least not until they completely abandoned the old currency and started a new one altogether. Then the old ones would be worth at most what they'd sell for as collector's items.